recognition of higher states of consciousness is a recurring theme that is evident in all cultures throughout history. What is the basis of our conscious experience? The cycle of waking, dreaming, and sleeping. The simplest state of awareness is a self-referral state. It is a field of all possibilities. As the physicist Eddington said, the stuff of the world is mind stuff. The ancient Yoga Vasishtha likewise teaches that this world appears material, but is ultimately pure consciousness. These profound insights infer that consciousness is all there is, and we are not in the world. The world is within us. Welcome to Simplest State, where we examine these understandings and explore the very nature of consciousness and self-realization. Welcome to Simplest State. We have a special episode for you today, so I hope you'll join us as we attempt to unravel some of the mysteries of the universe. And if you enjoy our content, I hope you'll take a few seconds to like and subscribe to our channel. Our guest today is Dr. John Hagelin, a renowned quantum physicist, educator, and a leading proponent of peace. Dr. Hagelin earned his PhD in physics from Harvard University and went on to conduct research at CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research in Geneva. His work at the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center in California led to breakthrough publications in particle physics, astrophysics, and cosmology. He stands at the intersection of theoretical physics, consciousness research, and global well-being. His contributions have shone a light on the connections between scientific inquiry and spiritual practice. Dr. John Hagelin, a very warm welcome to you, and thank you very much for making time to join us today.
Really a pleasure to be with you. It's been a long time since we connected, and it's great to see your new work, and I'm looking forward to our time today.
As am I, John. It's wonderful to see you again, and your time is greatly appreciated. Let's start in considering that some of the very greatest minds in physics have often made statements that echo the reality as it is described in the ancient Vedic literature. As Niels Bohr suggested, everything we call real is made of things that cannot be regarded as real. And Erwin Schrödinger said, every man's world picture is and always remains construct of his mind. Now these statements echo the ancient Yoga Vasishtha, which says this world appears to be material, yet in reality it is pure consciousness. So I'm very happy that you're here to enlighten us on this exciting topic. Can you help us, please, to understand how unified field theories relate to consciousness as the underlying reality of the universe?
Yes, I would be honored to try and tackle that. It's usually a subject that would take more time than we have to truly unfold, but let's hit the highlights. What you've brought out and what those great scientists of the past have brought out is really a deep truth. It's a confounding truth. I think most physical scientists don't quite get it, but those at the cutting edge of physics and those very wise founders of quantum mechanics did get it. So let me start maybe with some pictures. We need to understand a little bit more what matter is. We need to understand a little bit more what mind is. And we need to understand the relationship between the two to unravel that mystery. And if you don't mind, I'm going to share a picture or two. Let's talk a little bit about what is matter. And then we're going to shift into something a little more mysterious and talk about what is mind. So starting with matter. Matter dominates our day. Matter dominates our senses. We believe we live in a material world, and practically speaking, we do. But what is the nature of that material world? Where does it come from? And what's it ultimately made out of? So developments in astronomy, cosmology, astrophysics physics over the last 50 years have really changed our view of what matter is and improved our understanding about where it comes from. This is a picture of what are called the pillars of creation, a deep space structure that was created by 3 exploding stars, supernovas, who blasted out in a huge burst or 3 huge bursts, the contents of that star, which then became a nursery for new stars and planets to form. Our sun and our Earth formed in a cloud rather like this. Relativistic astrophysics, supernova explosions, all of this it's marvelous and it's fun and it's fascinating. But a little more overwhelming is taking your background telescope, if it's a good one, instead of pointing it at the stars in the Milky Way, in that milky stripe across the sky, which is not milk, actually. It's a concentration of stars in the pancake-shaped galaxy in which we live. But instead of focusing on the stars in our galaxy, turn your telescope outward into deep space. And when you look out into deep space, there are fewer stars to see. But what you'll see with a good telescope is that there are more galaxies than stars. And every galaxy contains hundreds of billions of suns. And the number of galaxies these days, and we don't know for sure, but some of the latest understandings about how many galaxies there are tell us there may actually be an infinite number of galaxies, which gives you a sense for the incredible size of our universe and how much fun it is to explore it. Moving along, though, this outer space captivates all of us. Growing up as kids, I knew I had pictures of the solar system on my wall. But the real movement, the real exciting developments in physics and our understanding of reality, physical reality, have been not by looking out into the vastness of space, but have been looking within, turning our instruments within to explore that hidden world that is underneath the tip of the iceberg. By which I mean, instead of looking bigger and bigger to the vastness of the universe, start exploring what is within us, looking into the smaller world of cells and of molecules within those cells and atoms within those molecules and electrons and nuclei within those atoms and quarks within those nuclei, looking within to begin to peel away the layers of the onion of existence. And all of this, or most of it, is hidden from our senses because our eyes, ears, fingers cannot touch things or recognize things that are so small. So this inner world, the world that is literally within us, is actually more interesting than the incredible discoveries of space that are outside of us. And that's the direction we're going to go. So if you look at the structure of the world today with that knowledge in place, yes, we see the surface crust of physical reality that surrounds us, that our bodies are made of, that our homes are made of, that the earth is made of, stars are made of. But smaller than that, and within that, is the world of molecules. The world of cells, you could say first, made of molecules. Molecules made of atoms. Atoms made of nuclei and nucleons, that's protons, neutrons, electrons. And those protons are made of quarks, and so the investigation goes. But with today's instrumentation, today's particle accelerators especially, you can peel away layers and layers, peel away or probe inside of the surface layers of creation at the visible scale and explore the deeply invisible worlds of the extremely small at the subatomic, subnuclear levels of functioning. In this chart, just basically, it's too much to go into in any detail, but it maps out the structure of creation, structure of reality, from the surface reality that we can see, touch, and taste, to the inner realities that are microscopic and far beyond the range of our senses, deep, deep within us. So to simplify all of that physics, we can just say the surface of life is the material world, governed by what's called classical physics, Newtonian physics, brick and mortar physics. And everybody intuitively understands the world of bricks and mortar, whether you studied classical physics or not. But smaller than that is the world of the atom. And the atom is governed not by classical physics, not by Newtonian physics, but by quantum mechanics, which is a whole new language, a whole new logic, a whole new mathematics, which is necessary to understand anything about the atom, one bit about the atom. Why is it stable? Why does it exist? How does it function? A whole new understanding of the universe is required, a very subtle and quirky understanding called quantum mechanics. And then smaller than the atom is the atomic nucleus. The nucleus of an atom is 1,000,000 times smaller than the atom itself. And within the nucleus are the nuclear particles, protons, neutrons. And so that nuclear world, nuclear physics, is governed by a whole new language, a whole new logic, a whole new mathematics, a whole new theory called quantum field theory, which is the most successful theory in the history of science and can allow us to understand and calculate and test and prove things to what seems like infinite accuracy. It is a profound, complete, and successful understanding of that microscopic world on which the more macroscopic levels of the atom and the bricks and mortars and the stars and the galaxies are all based. And ultimately, the end of the story and the fulfillment of Einstein's lifelong dream is going deep into that nuclear level and then beyond what we call the nuclear level to the unified field, using Einstein's term. The unified field is the fundamental unity of life. The diversity of tens of thousands of molecules at a deeper level of atoms simplifies to maybe 100 chemical elements, 100 types of atoms. The atoms simplify to a small handful of more fundamental particles called protons and neutrons, and ultimately quarks and leptons. The unified field is the origin of all of that. And the unified field is this ocean of, you could say, pure existence, an ocean, unbounded ocean of pure being, pure intelligence, which is at the basis of the emergence of everything in the universe. All these layers of creation come out of the Big Bang, and the Big Bang begins at the unified field. So really quickly now, I don't want to talk about physics all day with you. You have other things you probably want to talk about, but from this unified field percolates all the particles and forces of nature. Like ginger ale effervesces bubbles. And when you look at this thing more carefully, this infinite, eternal silence of the unified field, this fundamental unity of life, which was here before the universe emerged, it was there before the Big Bang. It gave rise to the Big Bang. That eternal, never-ending silence at the foundation of the universe is also called the unified field. And what bubbles out of this unified field are sometimes called superstrings. In fact, that's what they're typically called. They're tiny elastic loops, not made of elastic, not made of rubber, not made of anything, because at this deep, deep level of nature, there is no physical. What we call physical reality only exists on the surface crust of life. By the time you get to molecules and atoms, quantum mechanics tells us there's no physical reality at that level. By the time you get to the atomic level in quantum mechanics and quantum field theory, you're not living in a world of matter. We're looking for a theory of matter, and we discovered that, yeah, there's a theory, but it's not matter. Matter is a surface impression that makes sense on the surface of life when it comes to dinner, when it comes to physical bodies, when it comes to building a house. The physical world makes perfect sense and is highly practical understanding. But at the quantum level, the level of the atom itself, that theory of physicality dissolves into really what is a world of mind. So when we say superstrings like tiny rubber bands are emerging from the unified field, that's true in a sense, but they're not made of rubber. They have no thickness. They do have elasticity, So I'm just saying we're calling these superstrings, but remember, we're at now a very deep level of reality where we're really talking about a world of mind, a world of being. And I'll explain this. Now, out of those vibrating strings, they're called superstrings, you can, if you're a nerd like me and some of us, you can count the different ways a rubber band can vibrate. And there are a variety of ways, counterclockwise, clockwise, in all sorts of more complicated forms of vibration. You can also calculate the frequency and energy of those vibrations. And Einstein tells us that energy relates to mass. So these vibrating strings, like rubber bands, each have their own mass depending upon how they're vibrating and how much energy they have. And from that, all the particles and forces of nature emerge. Because what emerges in nature is not particles and forces fundamentally, but these vibrating strings. But the vibrating strings have calculable masses and calculable properties and electric charge and so forth. And all the particles and forces of nature are just different vibrational states of these superstrings. So the graviton, for example, is a particle that is made of a clockwise vibrating loop. And the other forces of nature, like electromagnetism and light, are made of counterclockwise vibrating strings. And the other particles of nature, which is our lunch, our dinner, our human body, the matter, made of these what are called quarks and leptons, those are more complicated states of vibration of these rubber bands. But it all comes out from these vibrating strings. The universe emerges from the unified field. Because once you have the fundamental particles and forces, from there you have the universe. And that is really an enormous triumph of modern science. Sorry, we don't have a whole month to go into it, but this is the fulfillment of Einstein's lifelong dream. A completely unified understanding of everything in the universe emerging from an ocean of silence, an ocean of pure unity. So that's it for matter. You are now expert physicists familiar with the basic structure of matter and where it comes from, out of an ocean of eternal silence, ocean of eternal being. Now, let's come home to our subjective reality. Let's talk about mind. Mind is where we live our lives. Sure, we live in a body, but we're generally occupied by our thoughts, our mental activity, our feelings, and all of that is, subtler than matter. So what is mind? What is consciousness? And that's what we're going to talk about. And from that standpoint, we could talk about meditation easily on that basis. So on the left is the structure of physical nature. We've been through that from the silent depth of the ocean, the unified field, which is there before the universe and will continue to be there when this universe ceases to be in another 18 billion years or so. And coming out of that are the fundamental particles and forces, and then the atoms and the molecules, and the cells and the organisms and the planets, etc. Next to that, though, and we can simplify that, as basically unified field at the core, quantum field theory of elementary particles is more expressed reality. Even more expressed surface reality is the reality of atoms and molecules, governed quantum mechanics, and the surface crust of life, the physical in our physical bodies, is made of what's called classical reality, classical physics, classical matter. Parallel to that, of course, is us. We are part of the universe. We are made in the image of the universe. We have a physical body, which kind of dominates our physical presence. Subtle in the body is our mind, which is more of an internal, quieter, softer, more subtle reality within us, but it's also more intimate to us. I mean, more intimate than our mind, you could say, more intellect than our thoughts or our feelings. And our feelings are very abstract. How are you feeling, John, today? How have you been? Blah. Oh, I get it, sort of. Feelings are subtle, but they're important because they're very, very intimate to us. And if you're feeling bad, it doesn't matter whether your body hurts or not, or your mind is rested or not. you're feeling bad. So feelings are very intimate to us, and more intimate to us than our feelings is our consciousness. We're going to talk about that. We are our consciousness. We have a body, certainly. We have a mind, we have thoughts, certainly. We're usually just deluged with thoughts. Our focus is on our thoughts. We have subtler, tenderer, finer feelings. But then we have the knower inside of us. We are our consciousness. Consciousness is that within us which experiences everything. A little bit from a distance, but consciousness is the experiencer within us, which means it is the I within me. It's the I within you. And like that, the structure of the universe we've seen is classical physical surface reality, the world of quantum mechanics, which is the same as the world of mind. The mind functions on that level. Quantum field theory, which is more abstract, more unbounded, more profound, more subtle. This is the level we experience as our fine feelings. And then the unified field is that never-changing, that absolute field of total abstraction, the essence and source of reality, but which itself transcends classical reality. That field of pure existence, pure being, pure intelligence, at the basis of the laws of nature and at the basis of the universe. That basis of the laws of nature, that basis of everything, is also the basis of us. We have in our foundation our consciousness. And I'll argue a little later that what we call consciousness, or the self, capital S self, or Atma in the language of yoga, that Atma, our inner self, our consciousness, is the unified field, as extraordinary as that may originally seem. So here we have structure of matter with the unified field at its source, structure of mind, from gross thoughts, subtler thoughts, more abstract reasoning, to the finest feelings, to pure being, pure consciousness. That structure of human nature and the structure of physical nature are the same because we are part of nature. We're structured according to these same laws and according to these same layers. Now, interestingly enough, when mathematicians take our mind, which is simply understood as surface thought, surface chatter, more abstract, more profound, more settled reasoning, abstract reasoning, and then more abstract than our abstract reasoning is our very fine, very abstract feelings, and then pure being. Mathematicians have done a better job at dividing the mind into these various slices. And they've developed a language for each level of mind, from the most surface to the most profound. And we know some of these languages, I'm sure. The counting numbers 1, 2, 3, we can all count. We know what those numbers mean. Go to the store, buy 2 apples. Then there's the number 0, which is a little subtler, but logically it's important to have 0. That turns the natural numbers into the whole numbers, a more powerful, complete number system. Then the negative numbers form the integers. Then you add fractions. That forms what are called the rational numbers. And then you add all the points between fractions, between any 2 fractions, no matter how close. There's a large infinity of additional points that cannot be written down, except through an infinitely long number that nobody has time to write down. So those are called the real numbers. Without real numbers, Newton couldn't have invented calculus. There would be no physics, even classical physics, without real numbers. Subtler than that, complex numbers, or so-called imaginary numbers. I'm not going to try to describe those, but without that, you can't do quantum mechanics. And then subtler than that, function spaces. Without that, you can't do quantum field theory. So all these different languages of mind, deeper and bigger and more powerful and more complete and more amazing, more breathtakingly profound in their structure. And these are levels of more expanded awareness. This is more expansive levels of our own mind. We all have those levels. We don't always exercise them. We haven't practiced using them, but we all have these levels of mind. These are more expanded levels of awareness. This is where David Lynch, the filmmaker, says the big fish swim at the bottom of this, meaning the most profound ideas to produce the most amazingly disruptive videos, the great discoveries which will bring AI and computer science and discovery of quantum mechanics. The greatest, most expansive ideas are the deeper ideas. And so David was a great fan of meditation, I could even say, of diving deep within the mind where you discover the truly big fish, the world-changing ideas. And at the foundation of mind is just purely consciousness, pure being, pure abstract awareness. So all these levels of mind shown on the left, and all these levels of physical nature shown on the left, the levels of mind are shown on the right, levels of physical nature shown on the left. They fit each other like a glove. It's not surprising, but the human mind and human being is structured from the same laws of nature from which nature is structured. So all these deeper levels of physical reality, physical nature, different levels of human nature are really one and the same. At the foundation of the physical world is the unified field beyond the universe. Behind the subtlest of thoughts, the most expansive concepts is pure consciousness, the origin of mind. In those two unified fields of matter, unified field of consciousness are one. That is my proposition, and is a proposition I can prove if you give me 3 more hours, which you won't. So here we are. Now, finally, I'm going to touch on a subject that's going to hopefully lead into some discussion. And Ron is very, very familiar and expert at this subject. And this is one I think I really wanted to talk about. So forgive me for the long introduction. This is quicker, though. What is meditation in this context of what we described? Well, ordinarily, our minds are thinking, surface thoughts. And where do those surface thoughts come from? They come from deep within. They begin at the very depths of the mind as a very faint and subtle impulse, which takes shape and takes on form and takes on structure if it moves upward through the mechanics of the thinking process, then the machinery of thought, and becomes a more concrete and fully formulated thought. And then it pops into your mind on the surface and you think, I left my keys in the car. That thought took a second or more to evolve out of its initial abstract impulse. And meditation can be seen as the opposite process. Starting from where we are, which is on the surface level of thinking, occupied by surface events and surface thoughts. But meditation, traditionally understood and traditionally practiced from the ancient systems, is a technique or techniques to turn the awareness back within to begin to experience and explore deeper levels of mind, quieter levels of mind, earlier stages in the development of a thought, until that faintest impulse of fine feeling dissolves into pure silence, leading the mind from the outward direction back within to experience the source of mind, which is consciousness. Pure consciousness, without a thought, without a feeling, without any sensations, pure consciousness. In the language of yoga, that's called samadhi, meaning steady intellect, settled intellect. In the Yoga Sutras, which are the source of many of the world's greatest meditative traditions, begins the Yoga Sutras. Yoga, experience of inner unity, is simply the complete settling of the activity of the mind. The complete settling of the activity of the mind. And then the second verse shown below is, then the seer, then the knower, is established in the self, capital S, self, the inner self, the inner you. And the literature of yoga makes beautiful, beautiful statements about what this is about. They describe this fourth state, the state of yoga, the state of transcending, sometimes it's called, as the peaceful, the blissful, the undivided or unified, is thought to be the fourth state of consciousness, meaning not waking, not dreaming, not deep sleep, the fourth state of consciousness. That is the capital S self, our true self. That is our consciousness. That is to be known. And that is exactly what modern scientific research over the past, good gracious, 53 years has shown. That there is a fourth state of consciousness, that it transcends waking, it transcends sleep, it transcends dreaming. It's a deeply restful state, but a state of inner wakefulness. And that the influence of that deep physiological rest is reduction of stress, which is very important today in this crazy world, and reduction of anxiety and stress-driven behavior. And also, since most disease is caused or complicated by stress, reduction in every category of disease. This is 30 plus years of insurance, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, et cetera, insurance company data. Insurance companies are very keen to figure out how they're going to reduce their costs. And they're really getting behind meditation, because meditation, by reducing stress, and for other reasons we could go into, reduces disease across every major category of disease, heart health especially. Except childbirth. I have to point out that the number of births does not decrease, apparently, even with regular meditation, to which I say meditation is not an effective prophylactic. And I hope you do bear that in mind. Okay, and when it comes to heart attack, stroke, and death, a 2/3 drop in heart attack, stroke, and death among regular meditators has been confirmed through long-term government-funded studies. So this is pretty amazing. And that's why just recently, American Heart Association, the American Medical Association, American College of Cardiology, Nature Magazine, all in the past few months have come out, and the medical doctors, the medical communities have come out actually recommending meditation as an antidote to disease and to reduce high blood pressure. Last few slides. Transcending this experience of pure consciousness and the development of the brain. And just a picture or two, this state of samadhi or transcending, where the entire brain becomes highly synchronous. On the right-hand side is a highly coherent brain. And this shows the correlation or orderliness of brain functioning across the neurons, across the entire brain during the meditative state as compared to waking, dreaming, or deep sleep consciousness on the left. And that orderly brain functioning, what's called EEG coherence, correlates with increasing IQ, substantially increasing IQ, academic performance, moral reasoning. I use a little bit more of that in politics today, I think. Creativity, alertness, reaction time. So improved functioning of the brain or improved orderliness of the brain is good for everything that you do that uses the brain, which is essentially everything that you do. The increase in IQ and intelligence, as I said, is marked. And for that reason, students across the world, 12,000 plus schools now and colleges have adopted TM as part of their school day. TM is a particular meditation that has been studied perhaps in greatest depth. And that has been absorbed and used in many, many programs throughout the world. So samadhi just is pure consciousness. It's the Sanskrit term for that meditative state. It's pure abstract awareness. It's consciousness without content. It's unbounded awareness because there's no content, no sensory boundaries that confine the awareness. The awareness, therefore, slips beyond boundaries. That unbounded awareness you could call the never-changing reality, experience of that unified field that was there before this universe emerged and will still be there when this universe ceases to be. The never-changing versus everything else in life, which is ever-changing. Everything is ever-changing. inner unity in contrast to the outer diversity of life, which is practically endless diversity, inner silence, inner peace, in contrast to the outer dynamism that overwhelms our day. But the goal of meditation isn't just to glimpse that unbounded awareness, which is the you inside of you, which is probably the most precious and blissful experience you could ever have, but is missed by 90% of all people. Everyone seems to slip into it at some moment along the course of their life, or most people do. But to experience it regularly and clearly is really the goal of meditation. Is not just that, but stabilizing that experience in the brain so that the brain becomes competent to, on the one hand, enjoy this unbounded silence and total contentment while engaged in outer activity and getting the stuff done you've got to get done and enjoying it. That's called enlightenment. And we see that growing in the brain functioning. I won't go on to this, I'll go too long, but in the style of functioning of the brain, we see that transcendental experience coexisting with outer waking activity and with deep sleep and with dreaming, so that the inner light of life, one's own being, which is by nature expanded and contented, having that even inactivity stabilized within the brain functioning. And that's called no longer transcending, no longer pure consciousness. That's called enlightenment. Enlightenment is living the reality of life, that we are anchored in being, immutable, never changing, along with the ever-changing outer world, which becomes much more enjoyable when you're anchored in that which is invincible. Sometimes it's called self-realization because quickly, when the outer world, which dominates our life, whenever we're awake, we're engaged in sensory activity or surface mental activity. And that is our life. That's waking consciousness. What we don't see in waking consciousness is our inner being, our consciousness, which is never changing, ever content. It's overshadowed by outer activity to the point that we don't even know it's there. If you think about it, we are there and we're conscious, but the consciousness, the I inside of me, is not seen. What dominates is the outer world. With regular practice, that outer world can be enjoyed along with the unbroken inner silence of one's own being during waking, during deep sleep, during dreaming, and during anesthesia. It can be out cold on an operating table and be awake inside, not having thoughts. Under anesthesia, the mind is dead quiet, but you're still aware. You're aware before you go in. You're aware of the self while you're in. You're aware of the self while you're out. It's permanent samadhi. So, inner peace, inner contentment, inner stability. And one last thing, because I suspect some of you, if you're my age, if any of you are my age, Ron is my age, I suspect some of you have heard of the book, The Secret. And the book talks about the ability to achieve anything by mere desire. That's the concept. And here's how that works. And here's why it doesn't always work. Our thoughts are more or less powerful or weak, depending upon whether those are surface thoughts, just random thoughts that are fleeting through your mind, or deeper, more profound, settled thoughts, deep near the basis of our mind. You've seen these levels before as I've talked about the mind, but there's surface thoughts that has to do with what's sometimes called Vaikari. This has to do with the classical world of physical matter. It has a lot to do with our bodies, our speech. But subtler than that is abstract reasoning, or madhyama, if you wish. And subtler than that is our fine feeling level. And beyond that is pure being. And if you can anchor, if you're used to experiencing thought at these innermost, most powerful levels, those thoughts tackle water. Those thoughts are fulfilled quickly, effortlessly, with sometimes no effort at all. Better still is if you can practice meditation and get familiar and comfortable in the transcendent, unbounded being and plant one foot there, so to speak, be awake to that level, while you're thinking also at the tenderest, subtlest level of thought. That juxtaposition of subtle, powerful thought anchored in pure being, which is the origin of the universe. It's the intelligence that runs the universe. Those thoughts are enormously powerful. So there's a secret behind the secret. The secret behind the secret is transcend. Go to the subtlest levels of thought and even transcend the subtlest level of thought and project a desire from that level. And nature herself picks up that desire, and you will find your goals and desires being fulfilled with the effortlessness that is promised in the book, The Secret, but not often delivered. I'm going to stop there. I think poor Ron has gone to sleep because I've left him alone for so long. He's so jealous. Sorry, Ron, I did not mean to make you jealous by spending all that time with my slides.
John, it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. The way you described the underlying field of consciousness, the unified field, how it can be experienced as samadhi in meditation, and how with regular practice it's stabilized as enlightenment or self-realization, as you said, because we realize ourself, that pure consciousness.
Yeah.
I do have a question for you, if I may.
Please do.
You spoke about string theory, this vibratory quality of the unified field that bubbles up or emerges to give rise to particles and matter. And did I understand correctly that it's that inherent vibratory quality itself that causes it to emerge or to appear as matter? And does it actually manifest as matter in some way, or is that also an appearance?
Boy, that's a really deep question. And it's different levels on which we can answer it. First of all, I think it's fine to say, because we know there was a Big Bang. We can trace every moment of it. We know what happened at every stage in the unfoldment of the universe so precisely that if we changed anything, the world wouldn't look at all like it looks today. The theory works beautifully. And it's just, but you have to start from somewhere. And where you start from is that eternal unity, which really stands beyond time and space. Space and time emerge from that ocean in an expanding bubble, in a very rapidly expanding bubble, which includes not just particles and forces, it includes all of space. With the origin of that bubble, the emergence of that bubble marks the beginning of time and the beginning of space and everything that happens within time and space. It would be incorrect mathematically and probably selfish to think that our universe is the only thing to bubble out of this ocean. The very nature of it is to percolate universes like ginger ale effervescence bubbles. And the number of universes we can't even begin to compute. We don't have any real basis to answer that question. However, we do know that from the unified field as we understand it today in mathematical detail, in the form of what is called M theory, you might have heard of that under the name of string theory. M theory is a mature version of string theory with the complete understanding intact. But M theory allows not just universes like ours, but a large number of different universes, a huge number of universes with different laws of nature. That just means different numbers of particles, different types of particles, different numbers of forces, and so on and so forth. And therefore, the diversity of universes is nearly endless. We happen to be living in one that is habitable to life. There may be many universes that are far from habitable, in which case we don't live there. So we're only seeing a habitable universe. But in any case, it is, from one perspective, sufficient to say that the universe emerges and the Big Bang happened. But a deeper look at the same question is, it's happening and or not happening, all within that ocean itself, that unbounded ocean that we think gives rise to the universe. From a practical standpoint, does. But really what you have is, it's sort of awesome to think about it, but within this ocean itself is a simultaneous coexistence of literally all possible universes. And in reality, none of them probably come out or have to come out. They're all in there. And they're all in there all at once. And if your awareness is sufficiently expanded, you're living that grand totality, which includes the realities of all possible universes and a very, very expansive enlightened stage, sometimes called Brahman consciousness. Brahman translates to the totality. So what happens is, and physics says that is the reality. And what happens is, in one of those multiple universes that exist within that field, well, I may be going beyond the scope of what is interesting to our audience, but when organisms start to emerge in any one of those universes, all of which exist, an organism like a worm or a squirrel or a human being, we try to make sense of our environment. And what we see is activity, evolution, change. And what is overall never changing, which is the simultaneous coexistence of all universes in such a way that when one changes, the other one takes its place. So that there's no evolution within that field. That field is beyond time. But within that field is the mirage of time, is the appearance of time to a sentient organism like a human or a squirrel that is actually needing to understand what's going on, but can't comprehend the whole. The whole is incomprehensible pretty much to anyone, except someone who may be living in that Brahman consciousness. So anyone less than that absolutely expanded type of awareness is going to get caught in the parts and caught up in a drama of evolution, which is going to go on and on and on and on, unless and until that individual develops that consciousness that is all and everything. So we get caught up in that, and we live it as though it's real. And on its own level, it's real. But the reality is much bigger than that, and it's eternal, and it's non-changing. And I'm sorry for such an abstract answer to a very good question.
Yes, it's a wonderful answer. And I was thinking, of course, in terms of how the Vedic literature talks about Maya. And how
Maya.
The universe is being, illusory. But at the same time, as you said, in our state of consciousness, we cannot consider that this is not real, that the Big Bang didn't happen. We are here, we are acting, our actions do have consequences.
Yes, it's true. For our own evolution and for the well-being of our society, the evolution of the world. We all have a great deal of power as to the future of our planet, especially. I don't know that we're always exercising that with the full scope of broad awareness that we really need in this time of development of civilization. We have weapons now that can wipe out the world or all life on Earth many times over. Are we really living our fullest expanded consciousness, mind and heart, that will really prevent the use of those insane weapons? So we have evolved to the point that we're a great danger, not only to ourselves, but to the whole planet and all life on this planet. And if life fails to survive on this planet, it would be far, far away, both in space and time, to find another civilization like ours with these capabilities and with an opportunity to live ultimate reality and ultimate bliss and enlightenment. We're so close, you know? When they were just squirrels, we weren't so close, but we're so close with this human nervous system that is capable of just intellectually comprehending, but directly experiencing ultimate reality, not just in that hugely expansive inner state, that meditative state of transcending, but more and more in activity. We have this unbelievable gift of the human nervous system, and we've got to use it for our own safety and security. We're at the point now where we have to evolve because we can't go back. The technologies have been unleashed. Now we have to mature to the point where we can safely live with those technologies.
Yes, it's an interesting paradoxical situation where the human nervous system has this capability to experience the unbounded eternal awareness, pure consciousness, and live that totality of life, and at the same time has the capacity for complete destruction if we do not make wise decisions and base our decisions upon an expanded value awareness. I want to go back to one thing you said about speaking of awareness and the individuality. You talked about the I within me and within you, that Atma, and the Samadhi being the level of pure consciousness. So we could say that pure consciousness then is the unified field. In the language of physics, the unified field. From the language of yoga, Samadhi. It reminds me so much of what Schrödinger also said. He said, the total number of minds in the universe is one. He said, in fact, consciousness is a singularity phasing within all beings.
He did say that. He said, consciousness is only experienced in the first person, singular, which is a way of saying there's only one consciousness. And that is, it sounds like a simple thing to say, but when you think about it, it's extraordinary.
It's extraordinary, absolutely.
Intuitively, we don't grasp that so easily because we've been experiencing since our birth consciousness through this funnel of our senses and our specific environment, specific senses, specific environment. And we assume that somebody else is their own consciousness. And they do, of course. It's just that their consciousness is my consciousness. You wouldn't know that because their consciousness is living through, experiencing reality through that brain and those senses. And
it's a different reflection, we could say, of that pure awareness.
That's right. I'd say so. It's really only when someone knows Samadhi, that unbounded level of consciousness, even in that abstract silence of the transcendental state, or knows it better when it's stabilized along with waking, dreaming, and sleeping, or knows it better when everything is actually seen for its reality as unboundedness, unbounded awareness, where everything is seen as the universal self. But in those states of consciousness beyond waking, you start to realize that consciousness is everything, consciousness is everywhere, and that your consciousness can't be different from mine. If there's consciousness, it's the one. So Schrödinger was brilliant. I mean, they were all quite amazing, mostly men, who came up with this. But of course, in the great literature of the great traditions, great meditative traditions, the Yoga Sutras are one critically important text where it really lays out the practice of yoga, principles and practice of yoga in its most advanced stages. But many other traditions have also sprung from that, sometimes starting from that and adding their own cultural and other embellishments. But that ancient knowledge is precious. I don't think scientists generally, except for Schrödinger and some of the most brilliant, give it much attention.
Right.
But even the physics questions, the most complicated, up-to-date physics questions are found there. And when I discovered your favorite grand unified field theory, which is supersymmetric flipped SU5 cross U1 grand unified field theory, that was from experiencing pure consciousness. Because from that consciousness, if you're looking at the world from the top down, from the outside in, there are multiple grand unified theories, at least a half a dozen, that could conceivably be the correct grand unified theory that unites the various forces of nature. But if you're starting from that level, from the foundation, from the unified field, from the level of pure consciousness, and you ask the question, okay, what unified field theory, what grand unified theory can come out of that? Not what can come out of this, but what can come out of that? What comes out of the foundation? There's only one, and that's your favorite, supersymmetric flipped SU5 cross U1 grand unified field theory. So in other words, knowledge of the transcendent is kind of the ultimate key to verifying or even discovering other knowledge. But, that's a precious trick I have as a theoretical physicist, but I'm sure there's similar benefits in any area of study from knowing that ultimate reality of one's own transcendental.
And you touched briefly on the fact that we have to make better decisions, that we have the capability of literally destroying the planet. And in that context, how would you think that physicists and spiritual leaders could better collaborate to enhance public understanding of consciousness and the need for the development of consciousness? Are there any specific initiatives or projects that you think could lead to that conversation, lead to a greater understanding, greater collaboration of spirituality and consciousness? I mean, Einstein, and you can correct me on this, I can't quite remember, he said something to the effect of science without religion is lame and religion without science is blind.
What says this? There are some of us, certainly involved in this, who are speaking at the United Nations and keynote addresses. Also, I was invited for the last couple of years to give the closing address at what is called the World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates, which is a gigantic conference. And they've asked me to close it a couple of times now in a row because they wanted to end on a hopeful note. What's happening and what's hopeful is that that meditative experience of inner silence and unbounded awareness and experiencing more and more clearly one's eternal self, whose nature fundamentally is bliss. What's happening is the number of people who are engaged in these practices is growing, and there's a calming effect, a spillover effect of feeling blissful inside that can touch your neighbors, can touch your family, can eventually touch the surrounding society if there are enough people involved in dissolving that acute surface stress. Now, really intensive societal stress. And when war erupts in the world, Middle East, I've published a lot of papers on this subject, empirical papers with tremendously strong experimental confirmation. The first stage in the emergence of war is mounting tensions in religious, ethnic, political tensions in critical hotspots throughout the world. And if those tensions continue to build unchecked, it almost inevitably erupts as social violence. So you can start to diffuse that intense hatred and stress in desire for blood vengeance, which is, it's all stress. It's all the fear center of the brain activating parts of the physiology that are all about stress and stressful fight or flight response, self-defense, fear, self-defense. So meditation, as you know, I don't know any meditation that doesn't do this, is calming. It really settles deeply, deeply the mind and physiology, resulting, as I've shown briefly, in marked reductions in stress-related illness, reductions of blood pressure, heart attack, stroke, death, reductions in crime, substantial reductions in crime in cities throughout the world where they have more meditators. And there have been, 65 major studies published in leading peer-reviewed scientific journals on this effect. So the UN now, the Global Union of Scientists for Peace, which is an organization of Nobel laureates and leading political and scientific leaders dedicated to nuclear disarmament and to the prevention of war, they've adopted essentially meditation as their number one antidote to the breakout of war and social violence.
Wow.
And they have tried to, and funded, and successfully in some cases, large numbers of meditating instructions in critical hotspots throughout the world, like Jerusalem, the Middle East, prior to the buildup of wars, and even during the midst of wars, like in the Middle East in the mid-'80s, where after 2.25 years of war, it was a very tough, active war, they started assembling meditating groups. When the numbers became sufficient, and we pretty much knew how many it would take in the middle of that stressed environment to diffuse some of that stress, war deaths, war injuries, number of bombs dropped, bullets fired, progress towards peace among the negotiating factions, all improved markedly during those times when those meditators were gathered. They were practicing mostly in a group. That turns out to add an additional element of power and coherence. So in any case, that's one study, was a very famous study published in the world's best journal of conflict, the Yale University Journal of Conflict Resolution. The results were striking, and that has led to many, many dozens, 65, I think is the current number, of similar studies on larger and larger scales, studies big enough to carry the entire United States with large groups, frankly, where I'm sitting right now in a little town of Fairfield, Iowa, which is the home campus of Maharishi International University, and where we had the facilities and the desire to create large groups of thousands of regular meditators, long-term meditators, practicing in a group in 2 beautiful meditation domes. And during that 4.5-year study, the entire outlook of the United States changed on every level, but particularly violent crime was down markedly year after year after year. So it's getting out. That news is really spreading. And with the Global Union of Scientists for Peace, with the United Nations, recent 2 events that they had me keynote, spreading this knowledge throughout the various UN ambassadors and other people who work on peace promotion, peace creation, and war trauma, and internment camps, and so on and so forth. All of those people are getting excited about an alternative approach that dissolves the acute levels of stress throughout those different situations and circumstances and produce a better quality of action, thinking, action, and a better quality of life in society. So it's happening. Okay. We're going to have to get really busy, Ron, you and I, in our age, in our lifetime.
Yeah, because it's clear that surface level of action is a Band-Aid solution. It's not getting to the root of the problem. Clearly, the answer lies in working at a more subtle level. I find one of the most interesting theories in quantum field theory is that of entanglement. And this I find absolutely fascinating, because doesn't this point very directly to an underlying field, a universal connectedness?
Yes, it does. First of all, for people maybe not so familiar, let's keep it in simple terms. If particles interact with each other, or somehow had some previous interaction, that, you could say, memory of that interaction sustains unless it is intentionally disrupted by something. So take your favorite fundamental particle, Ron. That's obviously the neutral pion, the pi zero.
Naturally.
If you have a pion, which is made of quarks, and you just let it be for a moment, within a millionth of a second, it explodes into 2 photons, 2 particles of light, moving at opposite directions away from each other at the speed of light. So it's already past the moon. It's on its way to Mars. This one's no, all the way in the other direction. Now, a photon, like many elementary particles, is a spinning particle. So a photon has spin. And a photon can have two directions of spin. We can choose the names up and down. So spinning this way with my fingers would be spin down. Spinning this way with my fingers is called spin up, but let's call it clockwise and counterclockwise. If one is clockwise, the other photon has to be counterclockwise because the pion has no spin at all. It has no angular momentum. So what comes out of it must have no angular momentum because angular momentum is a conserved quantity in nature, just like energy is a conserved quantity in nature. So if one of these photons has spin up, the other one has to have spin down. But really, things are a little spookier than that in quantum mechanics. Both of those photons will be in a peculiar quantum state of both spin up and spin down. So one photon, which classically speaking can only be spinning in one direction, is actually in some quantum spooky coexistence of spinning both that way and that way, which defies classical intuition, but it's not a classical particle anyway. However, so these go off in opposite directions. And if somebody is able to locate one of those particles, which is now well beyond the moon, and measure its spin, it will find out that it is either spinning up or it's spinning down. Your classical measuring apparatus can't, record both because big physical systems can't contradict themselves. It's either up or it's down, but it was both before the measurement was made. That's called quantum superposition. But the moment it's discovered to be up, and it was both, the other photon, which is now behind Mars, moving in the other direction, is going to be the opposite because momentum spin is conserved, and therefore the total spin started zero. So whatever that spin was, this one has to be the opposite. That change happens, you could say, instantly. And that really upset Einstein because Einstein created relativity theory. And according to relativity theory, nothing can happen. No signal can be, no influence can exist beyond the speed of light. And physically, on the surface, that's true. Quantum mechanics avoids that constraint because quantum mechanics isn't truly within space and time. It is bordering on transcendental, and it is really, in that sense, beyond the grip of space and time. But Einstein was so upset with that he did not believe that, first of all, the experiments had not been performed way back in Einstein's time. They were not easy to do. But he said, if that's what quantum mechanics predicts, and he agrees that's what quantum mechanics predicts, then he's going to abandon quantum mechanics. And he did abandon quantum mechanics, even though he was one of its inventors. In that respect, Einstein was wrong. So, it happens. I was going to say you've probably been wrong once, but that might be a false assumption. Anyway, any other questions about physics, consciousness? What's for dinner?
Yes, I wondered if consciousness plays this fundamental role in quantum mechanics, does this have any implications for our understanding of free will? Does it in any way affect that concept of agency and choice?
Well, now you're really getting into areas of great mysticism and mystique. How would I answer that? Consciousness may or may not be involved in this collapse of the wave function. I mean, if you have a measuring apparatus looking at this photon spinning, do you really need a physicist to walk into the room and read the paper on the detector before it actually collapses? Or is it the actual interaction with the detector that's forcing it to collapse? These are deep questions. I suspect the latter is more correct. that it is. But this gets us into an area of quantum mechanics which is amazing. And not many quantum mechanics are necessarily up on this. It used to be called the many worlds theory of quantum mechanics. Since I've been writing on that subject, the name has shifted a little bit towards what's called many storylines within one indivisible wholeness of existence. To go into that, it would be fun someday, but it's going to bend your mind to the breaking point. So basically that issue of when and how does the wave function collapse? Does it collapse? It seems to collapse. You measure it, it's down. It was certainly both before you measured it. So something collapsed it. How does it happen? It does not happen according to any physical process. It just happens. And what's really going on there has been explored most carefully, in my opinion, by Murray Gell-Mann, a wonderful physicist who invented the name quark. He's responsible for a great deal of physics of the late 20th century and early 20th century. A good friend of mine, he was giving a keynote on the 100th anniversary of quantum mechanics. He was to give the keynote address in Los Angeles. And people had come from all over the world because he's a really brilliant, famous quantum mechanic, technician and philosopher. And he died 3 weeks before. I was asked to come in and take his place because I knew about his thinking and discoveries, and I agree with his thinking and discoveries. So I essentially presented what he would have presented. And that's used to be called the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. But I would like to call it MSLO, which stands for multiple storylines within one indivisible wholeness of existence. And it's basically the story of Brahman, the totality, the great total knowledge. And within that, one can show mathematically and convincingly that this idea of collapse of the wave function and the emergence of multiple storylines, multiple worlds, are continuously flowing out of each other, evolving from each other. One becomes 10, becomes 100, becomes 1,000. And you think, oh my God, how can there be 1,000 universes or a trillion or 1,000 trillion universes after all this dividing? It's all one wholeness. And within that wholeness, the mind can draw distinctions and create what seems like a diversity. But the reality is eternal unity. And ultimately, that is the answer. It's just not something for everybody to necessarily grab onto so easily.
Wonderful. There's one point I just want to mention briefly, because a couple of people have brought it up, and they say, well, how can there be this Brahm, this one indivisible whole, and yet we talk about states of consciousness? So I do just want to clarify with your kind help, John, that when we speak about states of consciousness, we're speaking about that with respect to the individual experience. There are no states of consciousness within that unified field, within that totality, within that pure consciousness. Is that a correct understanding?
Yeah, there's one ultimate understanding of the universe, which is one of unity. And within that unity, you can also understand the emergence of the appearance of difference, but it's all unity. So different states of consciousness, different apples and oranges, but in unity consciousness, apple, orange, war and peace are all that one universal wholeness of existence. And that is what physics ultimately confirms. And the great physicists who allow time to think about these things have all arrived at that same conclusion. And you can mathematically show step by step how this illusion of diversity arises.
What an incredible pinnacle of knowledge the world has achieved when we find that these advanced levels of physics corroborate or verify or validate The most ancient Vedic literature and what was spoken there, that now physics is saying, yes, there is an underlying field, and it seems to be pure consciousness. It's just a remarkable achievement. I do have one more point I'd like to ask you about in this regard, because the mind is the mind, and pure consciousness is pure consciousness. Only the self can know the self. The knower of Brahman is Brahman. And even Schrödinger said consciousness cannot be accounted for in physical terms. So my question, John, is, despite these remarkable advances in the penetrating abstractness of these highest levels of physics, can science, can physics ever really provide an equation for the unified field?
Let me think about that. It's a good question. We can provide a very elegant equation that describes string theory, its structure, its function, and from that structure and function and the basic laws of mathematics governing that, you can see how the universe, how the unified field can give rise to physical creation. That unified field that gives rise to physical creation is got to be consciousness. So it seems like there's a mathematical shape to consciousness. And what could that mean? Well, if you look into consciousness from the structure of the Vedic wisdom, you'll find that ultimately it's just a continuum. A continuum, however, that can be experienced as sound, as simply a sound like ah or om, or different ways of pronouncing, different ways of hearing, different ways of expressing it. But that simple single syllable description of consciousness is something you can really sink into, and it becomes a more elaborated experience. And that more elaborate structure of experience of the vibrations of the absolute, the vibrations of consciousness, are written down in the Vedic literature and in the structure of Rig Veda, which is the cornerstone of the Vedic literature. It's the kind of blueprint for the entire Vedic literature. You don't just have nimale purohitam yajñasya devam ritvicham uttaram ratnatam tamam. You've got 1 syllable, 8 syllables, 24 syllables, 64 syllables, 128 syllables. You have this self-unfolding map that unfolds itself in different stages, becoming more and more elaborated, more and more diversified, all contained in that one initial syllable of ah. So like that with the unified field, it's the unified field. But the unified field is governed by its own internal laws and logic and dynamics. In the same way, that absolute has to create creation somehow, even if it's all on the level of kind of impression or illusion. Nevertheless, there it is. And so that individual wholeness of existence has to be able to bring out of itself all the diverse qualities that constitute consciousness and creation. So while remaining one, within that one, the reverberant structure of that one, and its richer and richer and richer overtones and overtones and overtones, are the vibrations that we call elementary particles in physics, or that we call that are in the formula for the unified field, that are in the formula for string theory. So the mathematical structure of string theory is the same as the mathematical structure of the Rig Veda. One, the blueprint of the universe from the standpoint of the ancient wisdom of consciousness. One, the blueprint of creation from the standpoint of modern mathematical physics. But they're all described by the same symmetry group called E8, the exceptional group, E8, which is the most sophisticated mathematical symmetry that exists. And that amazing symmetrical structure, which is, I could show you a picture of it. It's almost impossible to conceive of the richness of what that structure is kind of the blueprint of the universe, as Veda is sometimes called the blueprint of the universe. It's the same mathematics between string theory and Veda.
That is perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much, John. You've been very kind and generous with your time. It's just wonderful and so gratifying to see this coming together of the deepest values of ancient knowledge with the most modern, advanced levels of scientific knowledge. Is there anything else you would like to say in closing?
I think you've covered everything well. The main thing about this knowledge, unfortunately, the ease and naturalness of transcending, that it shouldn't be a work. It's not an effort. Any effort is absolutely the opposite of the effortlessness of inner silence. So a technique, a meditation technique, a transcending technique like transcendental meditation, effortless, but it does take time, 20 minutes of practice, the minimum I would say, but 20 minutes is good, of practice twice a day if you can, is about the best investment you could ever make. My dad told me when I was young to put a quarter away per week. And I said, Dad, that's not going to amount to anything. But it did. And I'm very glad I did it like that. And meditation is blissful, it's peaceful, it's serene, you feel great afterwards, sleep better, healthier. And it's just a 20-minute investment twice a day, but I can't think of any other investment that is as delightful or as important for the full flowering of life, the full flowering of life, the way it's meant to be. Anyway, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon. Love your part of the world. I get up there rarely, but I'd love to see you.
Thank you so much, John. That's perfect. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing this time with us.
Really a pleasure, Ron. It's a joy to see you again.